Disclaimer, this content is protected by the Copyright Act of 1976. Enjoy the show, y'all, and welcome to the Dr. Creepy channel. So, all right, let's talk about The Conjuring. This movie is based on a true story that is even scarier than what you see on screen. But before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Now, let's get into it. Can I just say that intro is way too long? But anyways, let's get started. In January 1971, the Perron family, Carolyn, Roger, and their 5 daughters moved into an old farmhouse in Rhode Island. Let me tell you, some crazy stuff started happening to them. But here's the thing. It didn't start off all ghostly and spooky. It was just some weird things moving around and strange noises. You know, typical old house stuff. They didn't think much of it at first. But then things started to escalate. The kids in the family actually thought the ghosts were pretty friendly. They would even tuck them in at night and give them kisses on the forehead. Can you believe that? They even remember what the ghost smelled like. It wasn't like their mom's smell. It was more like flowers and fruit. Pretty wild, right? But of course, things couldn't stay all friendly for long. The family started experiencing some really creepy stuff. The girls were attacked by unseen entities in the barn. And one night, they heard voices telling them about bodies in the walls. Can you imagine? That's some next level horror movie stuff. And it even gets worse approximately every morning at 5:15 a.m. The whole house would smell like rotting flesh. I mean, that's enough to make anyone jump out of bed, right? And then there was this male ghost that was tormenting the girls. It was so bad that they don't even want to talk about it. Let's just say it was really, really bad.
Is opened, you can never really close it again. You can turn your back on it and pretend it doesn't exist and pretend whatever happened or that you saw was some figment of your imagination, but eventually and inevitably something is going to reach through and tap you on the shoulder and remind you of its existence.
You'd think after all this, the family would pack up and get the heck out of there, but nope, they decided to tough it out. I don't know about you, but I would have been out of there in a heartbeat. But hey, it makes for a good horror story, right? The mom of the family, Carolyn, seemed to be the most affected by all the ghostly happenings. She even had a ghostly woman in gray appear next to her bed, telling her to get out. I mean, that's a pretty clear message if you ask me.
Get out! Get out!
But they didn't listen. Turns out this woman in gray could have been a witch named Bathsheba Thayer, who was supposedly haunting the place. Or maybe she was just one of the many ghosts hanging around. Who knows? Ghosts aren't exactly something you can study in a lab, you know? Anyway, this Bathsheba character didn't start off with all of the scary stuff. She started off with some harmless poltergeist activity, like pinching and poking the family, but it didn't stay harmless for long, let me tell you. Chapter 2. So here's the deal. The parents were convinced that the ghost wanted them out of the house. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? Remember when the ghost was like, get out, get out. Yeah, that was the clear message. And they think the ghost tried to scare them away by tormenting Carolyn. When that didn't work, they claim that the spirit actually possessed Carolyn to really freak them out. I gotta say, that's a pretty effective strategy. Possessing someone definitely gives you some power to mess with them. It left Carolyn feeling weak and emotionally drained. Poor thing, right? Now, here's the weirdest part of the story. It's not just the gray witch haunting the family or the broom ghosts that like to clean up the kitchen when no one was around. No, it gets even stranger. So it's not exactly clear how the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved in this whole thing. Some say the family reached out to them. But according to Andre Perron, a family friend actually saw the Warrens giving a talk and told the family about them. And guess what? The parents decided to get in touch with the Warrens After Carolyn supposedly became possessed, the Warrens came to investigate, and Lorraine immediately sensed something dark in the house. They tried to cleanse the home and even did a seance with Carolyn in the basement. But guess what? The seance didn't go as planned and made things even worse.
And the thing didn't go on more than 3 minutes when all of a sudden my wife felt, I looked at her and her whole body was stressed out and like someone I didn't know.
She throws her head back, and I hear my mother starting to make sounds that should not come from a human being.
Carolyn, stay focused. Let Lorraine take the spirit. Carolyn, Roger, this is good. Stop!
And we stood there in shock and horror. Andrea and I did. We didn't move.
Then all of a sudden I saw her chair raise up off the floor and she come flying into the living room right in front of me.
And every single person in that house heard her skull strike that floor.
Talk about a major failure. The Warrens kept visiting the Perron family over the next 10 years, but they never really fixed anything. Lorraine never talked publicly about what happened during the seance, but she did say it messed her up big time. Andrea Perron backs up her story and says that she snuck into the basement to see the seance for herself. And let me tell you, it was intense. Like, her mom started speaking in some crazy language, and her chair started floating. She even got thrown across the room. I mean, that's some serious paranormal activity right there. Now, if you've seen the Conjuring movie, you probably remember those creepy hide and clap scenes. Well, it turns out the real story behind them is even scarier. Cynthia Perrons says that one day, while they were playing hide and seek on the farm, she hid in a pine box with no lock or ventilation. Can you imagine? That's like a nightmare come to life. I remember watching The Conjuring in 2013, but this story is way more terrifying than what you see on screen. I should do a movie review of the film sometime. Chapter 3. All right, so here's the deal. Cynthia was playing hide and seek, but when no one came to find her, she decided to find a new hiding spot. The problem was, when she tried to get out of the box she hid in, it wouldn't open. Panic mode activated. She started freaking out, pushing and kicking the lid, but no one heard her. Luckily, her sister Nancy came along 20 minutes later and opened the box like it was no big deal. Was it some paranormal stuff or just a crappy old box? You be the judge. According to the Perron family, they're still being haunted by Bathsheba Fair. When they were invited to the set of the Conjuring movie, everyone was supposed to go, but Carolyn chickened out at the last minute. She claimed she didn't want to make the trip, but let's be real, she probably didn't want to dig up the past. Anyway, while they were being interviewed, a crazy wind came out of nowhere, knocked down cameras and lights. They all agreed it was Bathsheba's curse. And get this, when they got back to their hotels, they found out their mom had broken her hip at the exact time the wind swept over them. When they went to see her in the hospital, she apparently sat up and said something about Bathsheba not wanting to be exposed. Spooky stuff, right? Andrea Perrons says that everyone who has lived in the house has experienced the haunting. Some even ran away screaming for their lives. There was this one guy who bought the house and started a restoration project, but he ended up leaving in a hurry, leaving behind his car, tools, and even his clothes. Talk about a major freak out. But the current owner, Norma Sutcliffe, claims the house isn't as haunted as people say. She's only seen and heard weird things, like people talking in other rooms, footsteps when no one's home, and a strange blue light shooting around. Yeah, Norma, that's still not normal. Time to get out. After The Conjuring came out, Norma got fed up with all the attention and tried to prove the Perron family story wrong. But let's talk about the real Bathsheba. Turns out she was just a regular woman who was married and had 4 kids. Yeah, 3 of them died young, but it was the 19th century, so sadly, that wasn't uncommon. Bathsheba passed away from a stroke in 1885 and was buried next to her first husband and kids, so maybe she's just a victim of bad press and not an evil witch after all. Now, here's the big question. Why didn't the Perrons family just leave the haunted house? Well, according to them, it all came down to money. They couldn't afford to move out during the tough economic times of the Nixon and Carter administrations. Plus, finding a place for their big family was a challenge. And let's not forget that their farm's value was going down the drain. They would have been broke if they just walked away. Finally, in 1980, they were able to sell the house, and they hightailed it to Georgia without looking back. So, what do you think? Do you believe in hauntings? It's up to you to decide. So tonight, we're going to jump right into unveiling the infamous case of the Cecil Hotel, specifically surrounding Elisa Lam. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe. It's a small click for you, but for us, it really means a lot. No, let's do a deep dive into the Elisa Lam case at the infamous Cecil Hotel. So the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles is a place that's been wrapped in mystery and dark tales for years. One of the most puzzling stories linked to this infamous hotel is the strange disappearance and death of Elisa Lam. In this video, we're going to unravel the details of the Elisa Lam case, looking at what happened before her tragic end and the investigations that have kept people hooked. The Cecil Hotel's dark history. The world of the Cecil Hotel in downtown LA. This place has been a hotbed of mystery and drama since it first opened its doors back in the 1920s. It's got a pretty dark past filled with crime and tragedy, making it one of the most notorious spots in the city. Originally, the Cecil was meant to be the swanky spot for business folks and tourists, but then the Great Depression hit and the area around the hotel turned into a haven for crime and homelessness. Cecil couldn't escape this change. And over time, the Cecil has seen its fair share of suicides, murders, and deaths that just can't be explained. The first suicide happened in 1931, and it set a pretty grim tone for the years to come. By the 60s, people were even calling it the suicide because of the high number of people taking their own lives there. At the Cecil's creepy past doesn't stop at suicides. It's also been a temporary pad for some pretty infamous serial killers. Richard Ramirez, a.k.a. the Night Stalker, was living at the Cecil during his murder spree in the 80s. And then there was Jack Unterweger, another serial killer who stayed at the hotel in 91 while he was off committing his own set of murders. One of the most bone-chilling events at the Cecil was the mysterious death of Elisa Lam in 2013, which we'll get into in a moment. This 21-year-old student from Canada was found dead in a water tank on the hotel's roof weeks after she went missing. No one really knows what happened to her, which just adds to Cecil's eerie reputation. Even though they've tried to rebrand and renovate, the Cecil can't seem to shake its dark history. It's like a magnet for all things creepy, drawing in thrill seekers and ghost hunters from all over the world. So the Elisa Lam case at the Cecil Hotel has been a hot topic because of its creepy circumstances and the hotel's notorious reputation. We're going to try and shed some light on what happened around her disappearance, the shocking discovery of her body, and all the theories that have popped up trying to explain this baffling case. Now, let's get into the details. 1. The disappearance. On January 31, 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old student from Canada, checked into the Cecil Hotel. A few days later, she was gone, leaving her stuff behind. The hotel's CCTV cams caught her acting weird in the elevator, which just added to the mystery. This footage went viral and got everyone talking about the case. 2. The discovery. After Lam disappeared, people staying at the Cecil started complaining about low water pressure and weird tasting tap water. When maintenance workers checked it out, they found Lam's body in one of the rooftop water tanks. This raised a lot of questions because getting into the tank and closing it would have been really hard. 3. The investigation. The police did a thorough investigation into Lam's death, looking at the hotel's security footage, talking to witnesses, and doing forensic tests. The autopsy report said her death was an accident caused by drowning, but a lot of people weren't convinced by this, leading to a bunch of conspiracy theories. 4. Conspiracy theories. The Elisa Lam case has sparked a ton of conspiracy theories, from supernatural stuff to claims of foul play. Some people think the hotel's dark past, with its links to serial killers and suicides, had something to do with Lam's death. Others think her strange behavior in the elevator was due to mental illness or drugs, and some even suggest the hotel staff or someone else was involved. Casual review of the Cecil Hotel in today's media, making headlines for years, and it's not slowing down. A hotel in recent media. The Cecil Hotel has been the subject of numerous documentaries, news stories, and even inspired a season of the hit show American Horror Story. Its dark history and the unsolved mysteries associated with it have made it a fascinating subject for storytellers. Netflix's recent docu-series Crime Scene, The Vanishing at the Cecil Hotel, brought the hotel back into the spotlight. The series dives into the hotel's past, the circumstances surrounding Lam's death, and the various conspiracy theories that have emerged. The Cecil Hotel has also been featured in numerous podcasts and YouTube channels with creators drawn to its eerie past and the unsolved mysteries it holds. From its association with infamous serial killers to the numerous suicides and unexplained deaths, the Cecil Hotel continues to captivate audiences worldwide. In conclusion, the Cecil Hotel's notorious reputation and dark past have cemented its place in today's media. Whether it's through documentaries, TV shows, or online content, the stories and mysteries of the Cecil Hotel continue to intrigue and captivate audiences, ensuring its enduring presence in the media landscape. Finally, to wrap it up, the Elisa Lam case at the Cecil Hotel is still a mystery that keeps people fascinated. Even though the official cause of death was accidental drowning, the weird circumstances around her disappearance and death have led to loads of conspiracy theories. This case shows just how much we're drawn to unsolved mysteries and how they can captivate us. As we dig deeper into the Elisa Lam case, we're left with more questions than answers, adding to the mystique of the infamous Cecil Hotel. Furthermore, the Cecil Hotel's past is a scary mix of crime and tragedy. Its walls are filled with stories of death and despair, making it a pretty grim landmark in LA. The hotel's notorious reputation keeps people fascinated, reminding us all of the city's darker history. Now, let's take a look at the Elisa Lam case in a different shed of light. The day of her trip, Lam made a phone call to her parents, unaware that it would be the last time they would hear from her. It was now February 2013, and several days had passed without any contact from Elisa. What made the situation even stranger was that she was supposed to have left Los Angeles and arrived in Santa Cruz by now, but she had not checked out of her room at the Cecil Hotel. Concerned, the police were notified and an official investigation began. Upon searching her room, the police found most of Lam's belongings and no signs of a struggle. They thoroughly searched the hotel rooms they had access to, as well as the surrounding area and the roof, but found no trace of her. Elisa Lam had disappeared. During their initial investigation, the police discovered an unusual detail. When Elisa booked her room at the Cecil Hotel, she had actually booked a shared room to save money. However, her roommates became alarmed by her strange behavior and requested that she be moved to her own room. The hotel complied with their request. Although this detail seemed insignificant at the time, it would later prove to be important in the case. With no leads and the hotel thoroughly searched, nearly 2 weeks passed without any progress in the investigation. Her parents grew increasingly worried that she may never be found. However, a major breakthrough was about to occur. On February 14th, the Laptey released surveillance footage of Elisa inside an elevator at the Hotel Cecil. In the video, she enters the elevator and presses all the buttons to every floor, then retreats to the corner and waits. Initially calm, Elisa soon appears frightened and as if she is hiding from something. When she exits the elevator, she appears disheveled and visibly anxious. She attempts to press all the buttons again, and the strange behavior continues. The elevator door opens and closes randomly, but Elisa is not seen on any other camera footage after this point. That's eerie and perplexing footage provided a significant lead for investigators, indicating that Elisa was not mentally well at the time of her disappearance. However, it was astonishing that this was the only camera that captured her that night, considering the size of the hotel. Despite this breakthrough, the police still had no idea where Elisa had gone. She could still be in the hotel or could have traveled far away. As the investigation slowed down, life at the Cecil Hotel carried on as usual. Guests at the hotel began to voice their complaints about an ongoing and worsening issue. The water pressure in their showers was extremely low, and some guests even experienced discolored or black water. Those who drank the tap water or used it to brush their teeth noticed a strange taste. It became evident that the hotel was facing a problem with their water tanks, so a repairman named Santiago Lopez was sent to address the issue. He expected it to be a simple fix. However, when he reached the roof and opened one of the water tanks, he was horrified by what he discovered. Elisa Lam's lifeless and decomposing body was floating inside the giant tank. For the past 19 days, hotel residents had been showering and consuming water that had been contaminated by Elisa's body. This explained the poor taste and discoloration. The shocking discovery raised questions about how Elisa ended up in the water tank. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, a complete autopsy could not be performed. Nevertheless, investigators concluded that Elisa had entered the tank by herself and accidentally drowned. This ruling officially closed the case, but many unanswered questions remained. What was happening in the elevator footage of Elisa, and how did she end up on the hotel's roof and inside the water tank? The possibility of Elisa being murdered is intriguing, especially considering her behavior in the surveillance footage, where she appeared to be hiding from someone and trying to escape. One theory suggests that someone inside the hotel was targeting Elisa and hunting her down. In this scenario, it would make sense if the perpetrator was an employee of the hotel. This could explain why there was no other security footage capturing her presence prior to her death. Considering the location, it is likely that the hotel would have extensive camera coverage, but the employee may have erased the tapes or known how to avoid being captured on camera. Furthermore, this theory could explain how Elisa gained access to the roof and entered the large water tank. Another piece of evidence supporting this theory emerged during the investigation. Police dogs were brought in to search for Elisa before her body was discovered. Despite searching the entire hotel and most of the roof, the dogs did not pick up any scent. This could indicate that someone deliberately covered their tracks, which would not have raised suspicion if they were an employee. Another aspect frequently mentioned in discussions of the murder theory is the peculiar behavior of the elevator. Throughout the footage, Elisa repeatedly presses all the buttons inside the elevator. Strangely, the door remains open for 3 minutes without closing, which is highly unusual. Additionally, at one point, the door starts to close but immediately opens again, even though Elisa was not in the doorway to trigger the sensor. This odd behavior raises questions and could suggest that a hotel employee manipulated the elevator, possibly toying with Elisa before eventually killing her. If true, it would indicate a sick game played by the murderer, which is a truly horrifying thought. Upon further examination of the footage and conducting additional research, it becomes apparent that certain parts of the video appear to skip forward, leading some to believe that a full minute of recording was removed. Additionally, it seems that Elisa does speak at certain points in the footage, but her mouth appears unusually pixelated, making it impossible to discern her words. This could be indicative of editing, and it is plausible that an employee of the hotel who had access to the tapes in sufficient time could have made these alterations. However, it is important to note that while the theory of an employee being involved strengthens the case, the murderer does not necessarily have to be an employee. The Cecil Hotel was located in a rather shady part of town, and the day before her death, Elisa made a blog post expressing concern about encountering creepy individuals. She specifically mentioned Italian and Mexican men being persistent if they sensed any interest. This post could suggest that someone was making advances towards her and behaving inappropriately, potentially leading to her murder. Another indication of foul play is the fact that Elisa's phone was never found. It was not in her hotel room, nor was it discovered with her in the water tank. This detail becomes even more perplexing considering that multiple posts were shared on her blog after her death. This could imply that not only was Elisa murdered, but she was also robbed of some of her belongings that she had in her possession at the time. However, it is worth considering the possibility that Elisa scheduled these posts to go live at a specific time before her demise. When it comes to the condition of Elisa's body, there were no signs of physical trauma, which does raise doubts about the previous theory. Now let's delve into the next theory, which is undeniably the creepiest and revolves around the paranormal aspect. The Cecil Hotel has a notorious history, making it one of the darkest hotels known. Surprisingly, it is the same hotel where the Black Dahlia disappeared decades ago. Notorious serial killers Richard Ramirez and Jack Unterweger also resided there at different times. Additionally, a violent murder occurred in 1964, and the hotel's witnessed 15 confirmed suicides since its establishment. Due to this haunting history, many believers in the paranormal argue that the Cecil Hotel is incredibly haunted. But how does this relate to Elisa's death? When the footage of Elisa in the elevator was initially released, some noticed similarities to the Elevator game, a ritualistic game believed to transport players to another dimension. To play, one needs an elevator that goes up at least 10 floors and must follow a complex set of rules. Eventually, a woman enters the elevator and asks where you're going, but you must not look at her or speak to her. The elevator then descends to the first floor, supposedly transporting you to another world where you are the sole presence. While this game is unsettling, even if not believed to be true, the scariest part is that a single mistake during the ritual can lead to dire consequences. Perhaps Elisa had been playing the elevator game and something went terribly wrong due to an error in performing the ritual. This could explain why she appeared to be running and hiding from an unseen entity. It is possible that she was encountering a paranormal being that only she could perceive at the time. The strange behavior of the elevator, closing and quickly reopening as if someone was standing there, could be attributed to the presence of this entity. While this theory may seem far-fetched, it offers a potential explanation for the inexplicable nature of the case. It suggests that Elisa's death may have been a result of a mishap during the elevator game. Now, before I present the final theory and share my personal opinion on what happened, there is one more peculiar detail that I want to mention. It may not have any direct relevance or fit into the overall narrative, but it's an intriguing fact about the case. During the time Elisa Lam perished at the Cecil Hotel, there was a deadly tuberculosis outbreak in the surrounding area. Those displaying symptoms were tested to confirm the presence of tuberculosis, and the test used was named Lam Elisa. It's a bizarre coincidence, and while it likely holds no significance, it adds to the overall strangeness of the case. Now, let's move on to the final theory. Surprisingly, it aligns with the official conclusion reached by authorities, which is a first for this channel. Elisa clearly had a history of mental illness and had been diagnosed with depression. Elisa was prescribed 4 different medications to manage her symptoms. Although a complete autopsy was not conducted, blood tests revealed that she had not been taking her medication correctly at the time of her death. This could have led to hallucinations and unusual behavior, potentially explaining her actions in the elevator and why she was placed in a room without roommates. Based on her toxicology report, it appeared that Lam may have been experiencing a mental breakdown while in the elevator. Oh, despite the eerie nature of the elevator footage, the truth may be that she was simply having a breakdown. The misuse of her medication, combined with her mental disorders, could have caused her to imagine that someone was chasing her or that there was something out there. This could also explain her rapid shift from calm to panic within a 4-minute span, which is characteristic of bipolar disorder. However, there is a significant issue with this theory. How did she end up in the water tank? Accessing the roof would have required going through a locked door with a passcode known only to employees. If she had attempted to force the door open, an alarm would have been triggered, leading to her discovery. Therefore, it seems highly unlikely that she could have reached the roof alone through this door. Additionally, employees used ladders to inspect and work on the water tanks, and it was confirmed that no ladders were propped against them. This means that Elisa did not use a ladder to enter the tank. Furthermore, the hatch on the tank was closed when Santiago Lopez found her body. It is unclear how she could have closed it after falling in. These facts seem to discredit the theory entirely. However, further research uncovered a video showing someone accessing the roof of the Cecil Hotel without triggering any alarms. They achieved this by using the fire escape and climbing a ladder to the roof. This video suggests that Lam could have reached the roof undetected that night. Additionally, it revealed that the hatches on the water tanks were sometimes left open. This means that Lam could have jumped onto the tank and either intentionally or accidentally fallen in. The question of How she closed the hatch behind her remains unanswered, but it is possible that this was an error in the initial report. As for her missing phone, she had actually posted a blog post days before her death mentioning that she had misplaced it. There is no evidence to suggest that she found it afterward, so it is likely that she did not have her phone with her at the time of her death. Personally, I believe that she used the fire escape to access the hotel roof that night. Given her habit of taking rooftop pictures, it would have been within her capabilities. I also think that her misuse of medication contributed to hallucinations, leading her to genuinely believe that someone was chasing her. Once on the roof, she may have climbed onto a taller structure and then jumped onto the water tank, seeking refuge from her imagined threat. Tragically, she ended up drowning inside the tank. It is possible that the employee who discovered her body falsely claimed that the hatch was closed to avoid acknowledging that they were often left open. This would have absolved the hotel of some liability. I suspect that the hotel pushed the narrative that it was nearly impossible for her to access the roof in order to further minimize their liability. However, in reality, anyone could have accessed the roof that day. While there are still unanswered questions and suspicions of a possible murder based on the evidence presented, I am inclined to accept the conclusion that this case may not be as sinister as initially believed. Regardless of what truly happened that night, the case of Elisa Lam continues to haunt our thoughts and captivate our imaginations. Hey there, folks. Today, we're diving into the spine-chilling world of horror movies and their real-life inspirations. You know, they say truth is stranger than fiction, and boy, do we have some twisted tales for you. We're talking about the terrifying events that inspired some of cinema's scariest flicks. But before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Now, let's get into it. First up, we have the infamous Ed Gein killings that served as the inspiration for the Hitchcock classic Psycho. But that's not all. The cult classic, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, was also based on some seriously messed up real-life events. And who could forget the bone-chilling exorcism case that became the iconic film, The Exorcist? But today, we're shining a spotlight on a Spanish horror movie called Veronica. This flick, written and directed by Paco Plaza, tells the story of a teenage girl named Veronica who unleashes an otherworldly evil after messing around with a Ouija board. But guess what? A supernatural nightmare is actually based on a real-life mystery that had some seriously deadly consequences. Vaccinated character Veronica was inspired by a young girl named Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro who lived in the suburbs of Madrid, Spain back in 1990. Estefania, just 15 years old, developed an interest in the occult. Now, her parents didn't think much of it at first. They figured it was just a phase like any rebellious teenager goes through. So little did they know things were about to take a dark turn. Estefania got her hands on a Ouija board, dabbling in chances with her friends. One of her pals had tragically lost her ex-boyfriend in a motorcycle accident and wanted to communicate with his spirit. So they gathered around the Ouija board at school, ready to make contact. But before they could even begin, a nun busted in and broke the board into pieces, punishing the girls for their supposed blasphemy. Now, looking back, that punishment might have unleashed something far more sinister. Witnesses claim that when the board was smashed, a strange white fog started pouring out, and Estefania ended up inhaling it. Paranormal experts believe that this fog was actually an evil spirit or demon that possessed the poor girl, setting off a terrifying chain of events for her and her loved ones. Shortly after the Ouija board incident, Estefania fell seriously ill. She suffered from intense seizures during which she would bark and scream, and that's not all, and seen shadowy figures lurking around her house, tormenting her day and night. Her family tried everything, taking her to psychologists and doctors, but no one could figure out what was wrong with her. It's like a living nightmare. Tragically, about 6 months later, Estefania was admitted to a hospital in Madrid where she passed away under mysterious circumstances. The autopsy report couldn't pinpoint a clear cause of death. Her devastated parents were convinced that some wicked supernatural force was behind their daughter's untimely demise. And unfortunately, their horror didn't end there. 2. Now, let's dive deeper into the chilling events surrounding Estefania and the movie Veronica. You see, even after Estefania's death, her family wasn't free from the clutches of the sinister presence that had possessed and haunted their daughter. Things took a turn for the worse when they started hearing what sounded like Estefania screaming in terror from her room at night. But when they rushed in, there was nothing to be found, and the shrieking would abruptly stop. Exie's paranormal occurrences mostly happened in the dead of night. Estefania's sister's dolls would mysteriously leap off their shelves while doors and dresser drawers would open and close on their own. And it wasn't just objects moving by themselves. Family members began seeing shadowy figures lurking around the house, just like Estefania had described. These shadow people would whisper or even yell at the Gutierrez family members, terrorizing them. One night, things took a terrifying turn when Mrs. Gutierrez was attacked by one of these shadowy figures. It grabbed her in the middle of the night with invisible hands while her husband was helpless to stop the assault. Mrs. Gutierrez was so terrified that she reported the attack to the police, and her account was even documented in the police report. She described feeling pressure on top of her, but there was no one around, she said, and I quote, "There's someone here." Then she felt a pair of hands grab her feet and then her uncovered hand. Absolutely bone-chilling, right? These supernatural incidents continued to plague the Gutierrez family home for over a year after Estefania's death. But perhaps the most disturbing incident of all was when a photograph of Estefania was knocked off a shelf by itself, and when the family tried to put it back, the image somehow burst into flames inside the steel frame. Talk about a seriously creepy occurrence. Eventually, the family couldn't take it anymore and decided they needed help. But unlike in the movie, it took about a year before the police got involved. When they did, the chief inspector of the Spanish National Police, Jose Pedro Negri, along with 3 officers, witnessed and reported on the terrifying events. They found the Gutierrez family apartment in complete disarray, as if vandals had wreaked havoc inside. The most destruction was in Estefania's old bedroom, which her parents had kept intact. But the supernatural force that haunted them had destroyed everything in there. The police also experienced the haunting firsthand. They witnessed an invisible force roughly shoving anyone who entered Estefania's room. Posters and wallpaper were clawed up as if by some monstrous creature, and the officers were horrified when they saw a cross hanging in the room move on its own, eventually bending and breaking before their eyes, just like a scene out of The Exorcist. And to make things even more chilling, a large red-brown stain resembling blood appeared on the wall where the cross had been. The stain seemed to have a mind of its own, spreading itself on furniture and the floor, following the officers throughout the apartment. But the horror didn't stop there. Doors to a closed dresser suddenly burst open in front of the startled policemen, and they even heard loud banging noises coming from an empty Porsche. Can you imagine the terror they must have felt? 3. Hey there, listeners. Now, let's talk about the real-life events that inspired the movie Veronica. Some paranormal experts believe that these incidents are signs of a poltergeist, and guess what? The police officers who investigated the haunting actually recorded all these bizarre occurrences in their reports. So, this haunting is as official and verified as it gets, right? When the media caught wind of the story, it became an instant sensation, making it one of the most famous and well-documented hauntings in Spain. After the police investigation and all the media attention, the Gutierrez family decided to move out of their home in Vallecas to escape the tormenting haunting. And believe it or not, it actually worked. The family didn't experience any more supernatural incidents in their new home, and there were no reports of continued haunting in their old house. It seemed like whatever was terrorizing them had finally stopped. But even though the actual spirit seemed to have been put to rest, the ghost story of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro in the Vallecas case lived on. It became one of the most famous urban legends in Madrid and even in all of Spain, and that's where Paco Plaza's movie Veronica comes in. Released in 2017, this Spanish horror flick was a huge success, both critically and commercially. It even gained a massive following through streaming platforms. Now, Plaza did admit that he took some creative liberties with the story to adapt it for the big screen. He said that the real-life police report was impressive, but he wanted to create a whole vision for the movie. So while Veronica is based on the haunting of Estefania, there are definitely some fictional elements added to make it a gripping horror film. So the question remains, how much of Veronica is fact and how much is fiction? We may never know for sure. The mysterious death of Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro remains a tragic loss for her family, a media sensation, and an urban legend. It's yet another example of a true story that captured the public's imagination and morphed into a terrifying horror movie. So, what do you think, folks? Is Veronica based on a real paranormal incident, or is it just a chilling horror movie inspired by a famous ghost story? Let us know in the comments if you dare. Stay tuned for more spine-tingling tales on our podcast.
I know God. And you, sir, are no God.
Dr. Creepy,